All right, here we go. Mics are hot. Ready, camera one. Take one. We are rolling. Ready in 3, 2.
This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. If you're ready to see the rest of the world just as clearly, get your fresh perspective at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIX. Hello and welcome back. Eddie Brodosovich, George Stoya here. We will be joined by Josh McCuistion. It is the recruiting report. A lot to get into. Jonathan Hatton, Emmett Jones, both commit elsewhere, right? Woo. That's not going to be good, but it might be good. We don't know. We'll talk to Josh about it. But first, let us tell you about our good friends. We're going to go see them this weekend.
Saturday.
William and Lauren. As the official custom clothier of OU football, William and Lauren outfits your favorite OU players in custom suits that boost their confidence off the field to match their confidence on the field. Their perfectly tailored clothing ensures every Sooner stands out in comfort and style at prices that make luxury accessible. All you got to do is visit William and Lauren in Oklahoma City. That's where we'll be headed on Saturday morning to get George suited up, or online at williamandlauren.com. That is williamandlauren.com. Dress like a champion and make your style as legendary as Oklahoma football. You looking forward to the fitting?
I can't wait. You know, I currently
you got your brother and then your brother-in-law, your future brother-in-law coming in, right?
He's coming. Aaron's going to be there too, my fiance.
This is going to be a party.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And I'm really looking forward to it. You know, I only own really one suit.
Okay.
And so
this is going to be a big one.
Yeah, and to get a black custom one, thanks to William and Lauren, I am really looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it. It's going to be, we're going to put some cooling mechanisms in it, too, for the wedding day.
I was thinking, I wonder if they can get like a scripted, like, Sooner Scoop on the inside of the jacket.
That'd be sweet. I bet they can. All your needs at William and Lauren in Oklahoma City, as well as in Tulsa, or online at williamandlauren.com. All right, it is time for a recruiting report. There is plenty to get into on the recruiting trail for Oklahoma as we welcome in Josh McCuistion from Houston HQ. And I guess there's no better place to start than the 2026 running back situation in Norman, Oklahoma. Let's start with Jonathan Hatton, the one-time Oklahoma commit. He makes his commitment last weekend on Saturday and ends up committing to Texas A&M, Josh.
Yeah, guys, we're running a little later in the week, and we've had some news that's kind of built up through the course of this. But, yeah, with Jonathan Hatton, you know, we talked about this on last week's recruiting report where we discussed, you know, there was some buzz out there, and I know some predictions went in for Oklahoma. But my feeling was just always that A&M was going to be really tough to beat. I referenced Trooper Taylor and his ability as a recruiter. And A&M, you know, we know, like, they're going to do what they have to do to win recruiting battles. And I really do think that 10 years ago, Oklahoma might win this recruiting battle. As things stand right now, I think Oklahoma had to make a decision, guys. And I know people, they won't spend money. I don't think that's what this is. I think this was a calculated decision where OU said, okay, is this where we really want to really get NIL crazy here? And I think they decided not to. I think that's just how I feel about it. So, again, Jonathan Hatton, extremely talented guy. If there's a running back in the country that Oklahoma might have made that decision for, I think it's him. So, like, I don't want this to be a sour grapes kind of thing. A&M got a big-time player in Jonathan Hatton. But, again, we've talked about this, guys. Like, at running back, I think you have to be very, very conscientious of what you're doing because it's so easy to fall in love with a guy's highlights in high school and then kind of forget that as you get to college, the truly elite running backs are pretty few and far between.
Credit to Josh, too, because if you watched last week's recruiting report, Josh led you to the water on this. I mean, he kind of hinted at, hey, they may not get either Hatton or Jones, and that may be sort of by choice on Oklahoma's part. And that's what I wanted to ask you next about, Josh. Emmett Jones picks Oklahoma State. You know, for a long time, I remember when we saw him at OU camp a couple years ago, we thought, oh, well, he's an OU lock. He's Kiwan's son. What happened there, Josh? It feels like it was one of those things where, you know, if OU wanted him, they probably could have got him. I don't want to make that like a slight at OSU, but it does kind of feel that way, at least.
I think you could also say that it sounds like Oklahoma State did a really damn good job recruiting him here over the last month.
I think all those things can be true, guys. Sure. I think you're absolutely right, Eddie, that Oklahoma State, with that new staff, it feels like there has been some reinvigoration. Like they're recruiting a little differently, a little more effort, a little more just energy to what they're doing. And I think that resonated with Caden from some of the people I've talked to, and Caden slightly himself. What I will say as far as Oklahoma goes, guys, when you listen to Caden's comments following his announcement on Wednesday, he talked about wanting to stay home and stay in state. Do we really feel like a kid that grew up in an OU household, the son of an OU player, all these things, and in so many ways has followed in his father's footsteps? He wanted to stay in state, but he didn't want to go to Oklahoma. Like, I think sometimes you have to read the tea leaves a little bit there and kind of understand what's being said. But again, I agree with George. I think Oklahoma, in both these cases, made some decisions. And Jonathan Hatton, I think it's much more of it could have gone either way. I know he really liked Trooper Taylor. He really likes the proximity of A&M being much closer to his home in the San Antonio area. But at the same time, with Caden Jones, again, I mean, I think if Oklahoma is doing all the things that maybe that the Joneses would want them to do and being, in it with NIL and everything else, I think maybe it looks differently yesterday. But I think Oklahoma had to make some decisions, and I think they are, maybe, and George, you could answer this better than me, but there is a feeling that, maybe running back in the portal gets a look, and if you're going to go in that direction, then do you really want to jeopardize that at all with a high school recruit that might be eating away from some of your NIL funds?
Yeah, I think running back is certainly going to be a priority in the portal this spring, and that opens April 16th, I believe. Right. So be on the lookout for that. But that kind of leads me to my question to you, Josh, is does this mean that they're not going to add a 2026 running back? Like, is there going to be somebody that they now, shift their attention towards in this class?
Ryland Morris still possibly out there, even though he's still committed to Baylor, right, Josh?
Yeah, remains committed. And every time I talk to him, I mean, he's one of those guys that, you talk to some guys and, maybe we'll talk about one of them a little later, but you get that impression like, yeah, you're saying you're committed, but I don't know that I believe it in what you're doing. He says Ryland seems like if you ask him a question that could be perceived as a slight to Baylor, he'll round it up. I love Baylor. He really goes out of his way to make it clear that that's a real thing for him. And so I think that'll be that's not something that's just going to be easily overcome. But I do think Oklahoma is interested in him enough that he could still be part of the plan. I don't think that he is going to be a guy. I don't think this is Oklahoma just punting on running back in 2026. I think with Ryland Morris, there's an option. There's a couple other guys. Again, this is not guys, I mean, this is, George, you covered the NFL for a while. This is covering an NFL front office where things shift. Okay, we got, we missed out on this running back, but that gives us a little more money at defensive line. Well, okay, that guy didn't cost us maybe what we estimated, so now we got a little bit more money. Maybe we could go look at this kid out of Mississippi or Alabama or whatever. So it's always kind of a shifting tide of what you're talking about. But I don't think the plan is to just walk on running back at 2026.
Would you say the door's closed on Jonathan Hatton and or Caden Jones? Maybe a little bit more shut for somebody like a Hatton, and because of the connection back to Dorman, maybe the door is still open with Oklahoma and Caden Jones as we move into his senior season.
I would be a little surprised because to make this move, you had to make a tough choice with Caden Jones. You kind of had to, a guy that, again, has a lot of connection to the university. He and DeMarco Murray have a very good relationship. I'm sure there were some tough conversations in there where Oklahoma just kind of had to be like, hey, we're moving in this direction. We're doing this. So I think that's probably unlikely. Now, Hatton, he's so talented. Like I was saying earlier, if Oklahoma just kind of was like, hey, we're going to stay in contact with you, we're going to stay around. If anything changes, maybe we can revisit this conversation. I think those things are possible. I would say they're pretty unlikely.
Sure.
I just don't think that's what we're going to get out of the situation. But if you made me guess on which one of the guys they would revisit, I think it's Hatton, just because Hatton's a guy that I think they pretty clearly think is very, very elite, and I completely agree. So I think that might be again, if a door was going to reopen, he'd be the guy I would think about.
And I think for running back, and this goes for a lot of positions in the way that Jim Nagy and the staff's approaching it, it's a year-to-year basis. Like, I think they look at this running back room right now and they say, hey, we love the young guys, the potential of a Taylor Tatum and an Xavier Robinson, but we need to go get a guy that's a difference maker that's maybe played a little bit and has some playing experience at the Power 4 level. And so that's where I think their attention is in that room right now. Now, in a year or two, I think they'll be like, hey, we got to add some young bodies and develop some guys in that room. So I think it's one of those things where they look at it and say, okay, in this recruiting class, what's our priority? And I just don't think running back is a top priority unless it's the right guy.
Makes a lot of sense. And, just based off what we've seen in the very small sample size that we've been able to see somebody like a Torrey Blaylock.
Yeah.
Very interested.
Yeah.
Very interested in what Torrey Blaylock has brought to Oklahoma as a true freshman going through spring ball. Let's stay on the offensive side of the ball, Josh. Mason James caught up with our buddy Chad Simmons. It sounds like we're getting maybe closer and closer. Now, I don't know if it was a intended pun, but sooner than later definitely had me wondering where Mason James is at with his recruitment. He's headed to Notre Dame this weekend to take a visit to South Bend. You've put in a prediction for Mason James. It certainly seems like Oklahoma and Mason James, just being basically down the street from Norman North High School, still a relatively positive position for Mason James services.
Yeah, we talked about this, and for those who haven't gone to listen to Unofficial 40, please go back and do so. But we talked a little bit about this, but the thing that I come back to is it just feels like over the last month or so, he has started to be a little more candid about kind of where Oklahoma is, and I know I think Chad had another story from like a week prior where he just kind of said, yeah, I think Oklahoma's going to be real tough to beat here. Like, and that it just, that, and again, I think logically we all kind of know that, but at the same time, it's just one of those things where you're like, okay, there's a groundswell starting to build here. And then for that to kind of happen, and then immediately hear Mason James, quoted as a decision may come sooner than I thought. Oh, okay. Like something's kind of cooking here. So, I think with Mason, again, I talk about this all the time, but Oklahoma, one of the things they truly excel at is building those relationships. I think they've made his family feel really comfortable. He's really at ease with Oklahoma. There's a great relationship with Emmett Jones. And I think one of the things that will go underrated a little bit is how quickly he and Ben Arbuckle have connected. I think that's something we're starting to see is Ben Arbuckle is a pretty skilled recruiter. He's good at this. Guys seem to like him and kind of build a rapport. So I really like where that's going. And again, is it a huge surprise that Oklahoma's in good shape for a guy from Norman? Not necessarily, but I do think it's still a quality win. And it's something that can, if Oklahoma could get him in the boat, and that's kind of, this is part of what I wonder. Like, is Oklahoma starting to, I don't want to say turn the screws because they're very much, we're low pressure. We don't want to push guys. But there's a part of me that thinks you're starting to hear this buzz on a few guys where they're starting to say, okay, we need to start building a little momentum, a little okay, I'm gonna drop a great one here, a little inertia for Oklahoma to start getting going in 2026, where they're not really behind, but you would like to see them more like 7-8 commitments here as the next month goes on.
I mean, it's kind of one of those things, and it kind of catches you off guard if you're not real familiar, obviously, with the SEC recruiting and just in terms of where Oklahoma is in the grand scheme of things, just from a roster standpoint. But I know On3 put out one of those graphics this morning, and Oklahoma's 10th right now in the SEC in recruiting in 2026, I believe.
Yeah, and some of that's like Josh said, a lot of times, and we've talked about this, the class usually comes together a little bit later, and especially over the summer, it seems like that's when things start hitting for Oklahoma. But Josh, I wanted to ask you about something you said. You mentioned his relationship with Ben Arbuckle. Where does Ben Arbuckle and Emmett Jones see Mason James playing in this offense? Because he strikes me as a guy that could kind of move around, play in the slot, play outside, can do some different things, and they can get him the ball in space.
Guys, I obviously not seeing it, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
But kind of what I expect Oklahoma to do with Deion Burks is kind of what I think they're looking at with Mason James. Like, I think you're going to see where, okay, yeah, we can line him up in the slot. We don't have to change personnel. We can move him outside and do some different things. And again, it marries with some of the stuff we talked about Rylan Morris earlier, where they talked about, okay, Rylan Morris, he's going to be used sometimes as a slot receiver, sometimes as a running back. Like, that's what they've talked to him about. So I think they want to be pretty varied in how these guys line up. And it's not just, oh, he's a slot, he's an X, it's not sort of that conversation. So I think that's going to be really kind of interesting to follow. But Mason James, I talked about this as well on the 40 yesterday. There is definitely some thought that's been put in his head of like, don't just work at one when you're at these camps, you're at these 7-on-7s. Work a little bit of everything and kind of continue to fine tune being a complete receiver rather than just being one solo type of guy.
In terms of everybody else in that kind of that situation at wide receiver, Daniel Odom obviously still in tow. I know that we talked about him a little bit in this week's unofficial 40 as well, Josh.
Yeah, Daniel Odom's a guy that committed so early and kind of out of the blue. We talked about this, guys, even at the time, that there was this feeling of like, oh, that wasn't really a name I had on my radar. And that's not to say that Oklahoma didn't like Daniel Odom. It just seemed like, okay, there were a few other guys that maybe they had longer relationships with, or they were a little more comfortable with, or whatever it may be. And I thought with the Daniel Odom situation, he came on the visit with Jaden O'Neal. Obviously, they're good friends, and it just all kind of connected and just happened. And, I thought it was a very unusual commitment for Oklahoma under Brent Venables. That's not usually the way things have gone. It's usually been, relationships, and the guy's been up to campus 10 times. Like, that's usually the way these things go. You don't see a lot of these knee-jerk commitments, and so I thought that was kind of surprising. And frankly, one of the few guys I can kind of compare it to is last year, another guy from the Trinity League, the wide receiver who, as I'm starting to build this up, I'm totally blanking on his name, from Mater Dei that, Oklahoma ended up going to Washington.
Marcus Harris.
I was actually in the Scoop offices interviewing him this time, in the summer last year when he took a visit and then literally the next day committed. So, now you've got Odom from Bosco. So I don't know if this is a Trinity League thing or what that is, but again, it's unusual, and I said it yesterday, and I'm pretty comfortable sticking by it. I would be kind of surprised if Daniel Odom's in this class come signing day. We'll see what happens, and crazier things have happened. But I just, like you look at Mason James, you look at Aljur Miles, you look at some of the guys that Oklahoma's really been involved with for a while. I just kind of think that's more what we kind of expected to happen, I think, is what probably will happen.
If that were to happen, or you mentioned Aljur Miles, we already talked about Mason James, who would be some of those other options that maybe Oklahoma fans should keep an eye on at the wide receiver position in 26?
Well, a guy I brought up a lot is Jaden Warren from, down very close to me here in Houston at Iowa Colony, guy that, really Iowa Colony, I don't even think – it's another one of those deals where it wasn't even a program like 6 years ago, and now I think they went to state quarterfinals last year, kind of like it's in that same area as Manville and some of these other programs that we've watched really emerge over the last 10 or 15 years. He's a guy, his sister is at Oklahoma. There's a real strong connection there. So I think that's a guy that I would keep an eye on. I know Emmett Jones has already done an in-home visit with him in the spring.
Of course he has.
Zion Robinson. What's that?
I said, of course he has. It seems like Emmett Jones, if it can be done in recruiting, Emmett Jones gets that done.
He really does. I mean, and that's, again, that's the thing, and I was talking to somebody about that a few weeks ago, and it was kind of about Daniel Odom, but it was more peripheral than that. And it was just kind of like, he's got backup plans on backup plans. Like, there's names that he's interested in that, people haven't even mentioned yet. And so I think that's the nice thing is, and he's a recruiter's recruiter. Like, he is always thinking about this stuff and always working on, okay, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to pivot in this direction. So I think any OU fans that would be alarmed or concerned, I I think just be patient. But again, like I said, Jabari Brady is another one that took that visit a few weeks ago, really seemed to enjoy himself. It's already talking about coming back for an official. I think Missouri leads there based on some of the stuff I've heard. But again, he's a guy that you can't write off. And I would say probably lastly is Jordan Clay from San Antonio Madison. That's another guy, a big-bodied guy. Kind of fits what we were talking about on the 40 yesterday with how much bigger that receiver room's getting. Jordan Clay is like, I saw him at the Army, or excuse me, really do apologize, the Navy All-American Bowl in San Antonio a couple of months ago, and this is a like 6'1", 205-pound guy going into his senior year of high school. He's real big and sturdy and kind of could be that physical outside receiver that you think would do well in the SEC.
I was about to ask, Josh, those guys are all kind of bigger guys, and I brought this up on the pod. Is it kind of a shift in mindset of the type of receiver that they've been recruiting?
I don't think there's any question that is something they are looking at and has been I would say is clearly a concerted effort. It kind of reminds me of when Bill Bowe arrived, and all of a sudden you saw this shift from like a Lane Johnson kind of guy, like the 6'7", 250-pound high school kids to like Orlando Browns, like the 320-pound high school guys that were just enormous, kind of moving land masses kind of guys. And I think that's been as clear to me as this has been over the last 6 months, where I would say about the time you started to see all those injuries and players going down, you just watched all these smaller receivers kind of fall off OU's board, and they just said, unless you are special, we don't have time for that. We got to move, and we've got to have some of these bigger outside receivers. And guys, I mean, you look around the SEC, unless you're a Luther Burden, which again, a special player, most of the receivers that really excel are big guys, or at the very least are long guys with a lot of speed. Mm-hmm. Like you don't see a lot of, that slot guy dominated a game or that kind of thing. Even you go to South Carolina, years ago now. The guy that's been the 49ers just got traded.
Deebo Samuel?
Deebo. Yeah, Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel's not the longest guy in the world, but he played in college at like 210, 215. Big, strong, kind of powerful outside receiver. So I think there was some acknowledgement of like, okay, maybe we're going to have to pivot a little bit away from some of the smaller slot type guys.
Should be interesting. We will not let you get out of here without asking you about what's the latest with the Oklahoma quarterback situation in 2026. It seems like every week we have a little segment where it's like, all right, Josh, tell us the future of two people, Bowe Bentley and Jaden O'Neal. Anything latest there in terms of, obviously, Jaden O'Neal's expected to be arriving to Mustang High School here shortly, I would imagine, to start his career. Still currently committed to Oklahoma. Bowe Bentley's made his tour here over the course of the month. What's the latest on the Oklahoma quarterback situation?
Well, what I love is, and I didn't even do it knowingly, you said, we can't let you get out of here. And I'm like, this is Bowe Bentley and Jaden O'Neal. Like, I knew it had to be.
We know that. We know where we're going.
It is. It just is what it is. But, with Jaden, obviously went down to the Elite 11 while I was out of town. It kind of stunk. He was down not far from me, and it's the way the schedule worked out that I was out of town. But sounded like that went pretty well, talking to some of the people that were there. I know our guy Cody Belair was there from On 3. I just continue to have the impression that behind the scenes, it just seems like OU and Jaden O'Neal are kind of slowly moving apart. And I feel like I don't know, this is like the steps of grieving or something, guys. Like, because when it first happened, the offer to Bowe Bentley, we're like, whoa, this is out of nowhere.
Sure.
Like you go through the shock. And now it seems like we're starting to go through acceptance a little bit. Like, okay, maybe this isn't going to work out the way we thought it was going to at one point. So what I will say is what I think if Oklahoma and O'Neal are kind of willing to part ways, it tells me two things. O'Neal has other options he's very interested in and surely feels good about. And at the same time, Oklahoma has options they feel good about. And let's be honest, it's option. It's singular. If Oklahoma is willing, if Oklahoma and O'Neal are to part ways, then some of that is from Oklahoma's side. Whether it's 50-50, whether it's 90-10, I think that's kind of wasted energy to worry too much about that. But if they go a separate way, then Oklahoma to some degree has allowed that to happen.
Sure.
If they're allowing that to happen, I think it says a lot about where they think things are with Bowe Bentley. I think that is, guys, he's never hidden from being an Oklahoma fan. We know Oklahoma is going to put their best foot forward with NIL and all the other things. If you look at the programs he's kind of seriously considering, Oklahoma is the closest to home. Like there's just a lot that makes a lot of sense there. The move of Jaden O'Neal to Mustang is kind of the one thing where you're like, well, this is crazy. Like everything I thought I understood pretty early on, it was like, well, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I've read this wrong. But as time goes on and the ground kind of settles, I feel like we're all marching to the thing that we all kind of expected to happen.
It's going to be interesting to watch.
Josh, I wanted to end the show. I'm going to put you on the spot here. When is Oklahoma's next commitment? You don't have to say a name. You don't have to give a position. When do you think OU gets its next commitment?
I would say, let's see, what are we at? March 27th?
Yep.
I would say the next big camp that I'll be at is Under Armour in Houston on April 12th. I would bet they've got a commitment by that point in time. It maybe a couple. Like that wouldn't shock me at all.
There you go.
All right. I like it. I like that a lot. That means that we will have plenty to talk about the next time that we get to it. Obviously, headed into the first week of April. I was about to say March. We're at the end of March. We're about to be in April. All right. That's going to do it for a recruiting report. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, George. Thank you to myself. We will talk to you here next time on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.